Radio Catholic Exile is a conversational space for independent Catholics and all seekers curious about spirituality and social justice. A ministry of the Catholic Church in Exile, an independent Catholic jurisdiction with valid apostolic succession now growing in your community. We welcome your comments and questions, which we'll integrate for future programs. Send them to Rev Kelly, that's revkelly.cce@mail.com. Today's co-hosts are the Catholic Church in Exile's Archbishop Kristina Rake and Deacon Johannes Strobel. Let's all settle back and tune in.
Welcome, everybody, to Radio Catholic Exile. I'm one of your co-hosts today, Archbishop Kristina Rake, and I have with me one of our deacons, Deacon Johannes Strobel.
Hello, everybody.
And we're here to have just a conversation with you about questions we receive, people trying to understand what we're about. And so we invite you to come along with us as we grab our coffee and try to sort out what it is we think we are so that we can explain to you who we are. But thank you for being here this evening. Deacon, when you and I and the others in our group talked about the name Catholic Church in Exile, I think it really struck a chord with most people, like emotionally. There's almost this gasp of recognition. Did you feel that way about the name?
Yeah, I felt really strongly about the name right immediately because it struck like an emotional chord with me. I identify or was always Roman Catholic for all my life. I grew up in that space. I was an altar boy for years. I was on a path to become actually a priest in that in the Roman Catholic Church, and then I felt alienated. Felt, and it's not like I felt alienated and left. I felt in a way me was not necessarily there welcome anymore. So suddenly I felt myself outside of the space in a weird way, right? Like I'm looking still, I'm on a journey. My face is, my face is my face, but it wasn't allowed really to be living what I believed.
Yeah.
And it comes back to what I'm taking things too literal, but Catholic actually means in Greek all inclusive.
Right.
And then I'm experiencing the Roman Catholic Church as like, oh, they are not allowed to do that, and they are kind of well, we kind of God loves them, but we don't really, and and maybe later we'll be loved, and we didn't sort that out yet on how to include them, and they're not allowed to be leaders, but it felt like I was missing something in a way, and I felt like I'm on a path to nowhere, right? And that's like what struck with me when we talked about exile, because it's like you leaving something that's home. That's what it felt, right? For me, it felt home that I left.
Yeah.
And I left because of my conscience, because I didn't feel welcome anymore, and particularly I didn't feel the people that I wanted to be around me feeling welcome.
Yeah.
And then you suddenly find yourself in some form of desert, right? It's like the home is behind you. Where do you go? You're still trying to follow some faith, and the spirituality of Catholic Church is still in me, but where to go? And then, and then I encountered the Catholic Church in Exile, and at that time it had a different name, but it felt like this is a similar crowd of people who are looking and lost their home and building, actually looking for a better home, or looking for a home where they feel comfortable and welcome
Yeah, what you've described is so much of what I hear from people who approach me for help with spirituality. I mean, the Catholic Church in exile, the concept of being exiled from the place where you're planted and then having to stay there, it's really a description of religious trauma. And so many people have been a part of churches that hurt them and wounded them deeply. And these past two generations, to their incredible credit, have really cast a spotlight on mental health and on what it is, what it does to us, to better say, what it does to us for someone to say, you are not good enough, you do not belong, not just in any context, but in the context of family and in the context of our sense of ultimate existence.
Yes.
The church is speaking for God. So when it says you're out, or you're not right, or you're a little off, but we'll let you stay because you donate, whatever. And I'm talking about really bad circumstances, and not all churches behave this way. But what does that do to a human being who hears psychologically, there is no purpose for you to exist?
And particularly to something that is so deep as your own spirituality, right? That's,
Right.
I mean, we know how deep it is with, as you say, right? We know how deep it is when families are dysfunctional. That's really hitting home. But then something that is like tugging on my own fabric, right? I'm sensing something divine. I try to follow that. I'm trying to be spiritual and live that part, and then that's getting shut down. That's, it's such another dimension of me as a human being who is challenged in a way that I'm not supported, not like,
Right.
hey, we're on some level on that together, in that whole thing together.
That's what I loved about the name and the concept, especially for those who are familiar with the Moses story in the Hebrew Bible, and then again the exile out of Jerusalem. Um, that story is so human. That feeling of I'm wandering, I'm wandering with people who are wandering next to me in some cases, but in their own little desert. I'm wandering with people who are trying to wander with me, but go apart. Whenever I read the Moses story as a religious leader, I keep thinking of herding cats. I actually had to explain this to one of our African bishop elects. I'm like, we have an expression here. It's called herding cats. And then I sent him an AI generated video of a cowboy trying to wrangle cats.
Right. That
He says the
famous
greatest
advertising, right?
exactly, exactly. But it's this concept of all of us are in our own individual deserts because we are theologically, psychologically, neurologically, biologically exiled from each other in our own little packets of meat, matter, and protons. And then they're walking in their little packets of meat and matter and thoughts and perceptions. And as a group, as a small tribe, as a family, we're trying to wander in our exile. And then as a larger group, we're trying, as a global church, we're trying to walk, but we're all in our different deserts. Um, there's something about the experience of shared struggle that really deepens those community roots the way it did in the first century church. Um, and I don't know anyone who doesn't feel exiled, who doesn't feel exiled from their family, from their spouse, maybe from their community, from their home, from their religion, from their nation, from it doesn't matter. We all feel a little out of step in any group because we can't really know what the rest of the group is going through. We can only understand ourselves. And so that concept of exile has this beautiful cacophony of experiences, but all together creating this symphony of, for me, hope, that it's about the journey. Home's behind us, but home's also ahead of us. And like a turtle, we're kind of carrying our home with us at the same time.
Yeah, and it mirrors very well what you said, right? It mirrors very well how fragmented it seems around us, the world or our lives, right? In some way, and I find it fascinating because in a way, what you describe is not just the individuals in our group or us as a group. This is a much larger thing where people, right? I mean, they're looking for meaning. They're looking for ways of connecting with other people. They're looking for ways of living a sense of spirituality. And what happens then, right? In this specific group, it's like we're coming maybe from a similar home, right? In the sense that there's a lot of sense of Catholic traditions and Catholic prayers and Catholic rituals. And that doesn't mean necessarily, right, that is the only way where people should look and seek. And
Mm-hmm.
that's the only frame. It's just a frame that I can speak, at least for myself. It's a frame that I find is constantly surrounding me, right? I mean, if you look at even the history of Christianity in this country, right, or even the history of the US, so much language is biblical language, right? The beacon on
Yeah.
the hill, and and I have this funny moment when I'm thinking of myself, what if that whole frame of Judeo-biblical, Judeo-Christian world is actually taken out of me, taken out of my
Wow.
surroundings, right? And I'm like, we lose, if we want or not, we lose a lot of framing, language, thoughts, and that is just how I got formed, right? It's not I'm
Mm-hmm.
saying, if I have wonderful friends who are Buddhists, they go to Buddhist retreats and they grew up in that. And I'm pretty sure if I would have grown up in their culture, in their community, I might have been a Buddhist, and I felt probably very strong about it. That's my way of experiencing religion or the divine, which I don't think anybody has a truth handle on, right? Like, oh, we got it right, we know, and now our framing is the one that is relevant. I read this fascinating book. It's in the title. It's a German book. The title was about the pain of God,
Mm-hmm.
and it talked about it must be so painful for God to know when his son became human that it actually had to happen in a particular time at a particular location. And
Yeah.
he or she knew that it would be used as, well, that's exactly how it should be then, because Jesus came in this time in that space, and obviously we have to wear certain clothes, we have to stay in that cultural context and with that ethical rules and with the moral of that society. And I'm pretty sure God knew, like, man, I sent my kid down there, but they probably misinterpret that. They know, and
Yes.
it's the only way I can be experiencing a human experience, by being human. But it's so limiting for God,
Yes.
for Jesus. It's so limiting on the space in which he lived. And I find that so fascinating because I'm living in my time, and I'm still formed by my family's beliefs, by my experiences, and that is limiting. And I find it striking or very saddening, actually, when people say, well, my experience trumps yours, right? That's
Right.
somehow I have the truth, and I can only live mine, and that's still evolving. And I feel like every time I think I understand God, it's she's slipping away, right? And
Yeah.
and says, like, well, there's more to me. There's more to it,
Yeah.
and I'm happy you're trying to explore this in a relationship with me. And but there's a lot more, and every human being I meet is another corner of, yeah, the world is very diverse. There's a lot of different ways of being, living, thinking, believing, and my little corner is my corner.
Right.
I'm just happy I found a group that have Catholic traditions and is in that journey on some level together. And as you said, right, there's then also we have individual journeys, and I still have in the desert metaphor, right? I still have to put my foot in front of my foot. Not nobody else is doing that for me, right? I'm walking still, even if
Exactly.
group and I see some people in the far distance and some people in some other distance. Some people go in directions I don't know, right? They might have seen an oasis and they get good water there. I missed that part. But I'm still walking my path and they walk their path, but it's still, even in a crowd, I still need to walk myself. That
Right.
I find fascinating.
And you brought up a couple of points that really, cut to a couple of issues. I mean, the first one, as Catholics, and we say we're the Catholic Church in exile. And I received a message this morning from a seminarian in Kenya, or a group there, and he joined the WhatsApp group and said, "What do you mean when you say you're exiled from the Roman Catholic Church?" And I went, "No, it's not what we mean." And while provocative names are that are compelling, are wonderful, especially when they have that sort of knee jerk reaction, that emotional reaction. Um, but yeah, I understand why people think that you're exiled from Catholicism, but you have Catholic in your name. So that really cuts to the question of, what does it mean to be Catholic? Carrying that, and then you brought up the excellent point of truth. Framing truth. If we say, "Look, we're Catholic," okay, that's great. You can't, and this is one of my arguments against moral relativity. You can't accept that you are incorrect and continue to operate without some kind of cognitive dissonance. You have to believe that what you believe is true, otherwise, it's not a belief. It's a cosplay. Um, so, how do we say that we have these Catholic beliefs, we have Catholic rituals, we can legitimately call ourselves Catholic? I mean, Rome likes to claim the Catholic name, but there are millions of people in the Eastern Catholic churches that believe Rome went into heretic land long time ago. So Roman Catholics tend to think that's Catholic, and we're like, no, it's not even the oldest form. It's its own jurisdiction. It's its own thing. Like we're our own thing. So what makes us uniquely Catholic, and at the same time, how can we live out those beliefs in a way that is meaningful to us so that they are truth, they are frameworks for us, but we don't have to believe that we're right and you're wrong. We can believe I'm right, you're right. We're doing this in a way that speaks to us, but maybe we're all a little bit wrong too, because this is God. This is as complex as it gets. And we're on little tricycles, and God's driving a tank. We're chasing a tank on a tricycle with a broken wheel. And, so those are interesting questions, and it's an interesting interplay to talk about. Like, for example, what would you consider the 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 grounding for calling yourself Catholic? What connects you to the concept theologically, traditionally, historically, of Catholic as far as religion goes? Like, what's the baseline for you?
Yeah, that's really interesting, and that goes to the core, as you say, right? I mean,
Yeah.
for me, it it has to do with a couple of different things. I mean, there's the I would say the Christian basics, right? I mean,
Hmm.
Jesus Christ was real. He was the Son of God. He came to experience our world and save us from an history of generational sin.
Right.
We mistreated each other and we discarded relationships and for whatever purposes, right? And that just perpetuates. It's
Hmm.
systemic, and we got ripped out of that systemic impact of sin. That's I find that beautiful, actually. This
Yeah.
and fundamental repair of relationships that we can stand on, and now still have to do it in our lifetime, and the repercussions is of course still there of the systemic aspect. So that's one. I mean like fundamentally Christian, right? Catholic for me is this notion that yes, Jesus came in a particular historical time, and part of his being here was that he mentioned he would be and he is with us always. And that is, I'm getting emotional. That is powerful for me. That
Yeah.
he, he, while sharing the Last Supper, said to his disciples, right, you do this in remembrance of me, but I will actually be there. Not just like, okay, you're thinking of me, you're kind of in the mind, and sure, we have a little bit of memory, and that's anyway carried further down the line too for many people who carried it forward for us to actually know about that. But the notion that he's actually there, and
Yeah.
my own personal experience when I grew up Catholic and went to church a lot, I experienced it. I can't deny that, right? I don't understand. I can't explain it. There's probably scientific things that play a role too that I'm not aware of, and all of that stuff. But it was there. It's real. I experienced that. I continue to experience that in the Eucharist, for example, and when the bread and the wine become the body of Christ. And for me, that's powerful. That's definitely something. This notion that Jesus Christ is with us in eternity, and every moment is the same as like an combined right now, but connected to all other moments as well. So this longer part of an a history of being cared for by God. I mean, we can call it in theological terms, right? And like being saved and salvation, but it's God cares and God continues to care.
I think you've summed it up brilliantly. And when I talk about Catholicism and Catholic theology, I don't like the dead white man words, the Thomas words, the Augustine word, but you explained it perfectly. I think in that concept of the inbreaking that, and I'm a visual thinker. I think a lot of people are too. That you had two worlds, the material and the divine. The divine broke into the material and became a part of the material, so that we can now break into the divine. And Catholics call those sacraments. So that there is this interweaving between divinity and materiality that doesn't sort of, it actually kills death, so that there is an eternal aspect to everything because divinity comes in and grants us access to itself. I'm talking in very basic terms, not even a Catholic framework, because I think if you look at all religions, that's what they have at their core.
Mhm.
Their stories, their rituals. It's about an inbreaking of divinity into the material world, into chronological time, and then through that, the opportunity to break back. And so for me, Um, if you imagine yourself in a giant cathedral and there are 60 huge stained glass walls the size of tennis courts, like you'll see in England and in Germany, and you're standing in the middle on a bright sunny day, the light comes in all of them. And it's beautiful. You see the hues of reds, the purples, the greens, and some people want to walk to each window and spend some time at each window and then jump to the other. It's the same light coming through all of them. And each window is the framework that we give to that action of divinity and back. Okay. But the window itself has its own story, it has its own hues, it has its own imperfections that catch the light just right. So you can run around the cathedral and see them all, or you can sit in front of your own window and practice spirituality. And the practice of spirituality isn't simply adhering to a religion, it is actually taking in that concept of indwelling and outdwelling and bringing it into the world as a force for change, for peace, for help, for service. And if I sit for, so I became Catholic when I was 25, so it's been half my life. If I sit in front of this window till I'm 100, let's give me a little bit of grace in that. Let's say 100. God help me. So if I sit in front of it, that's 75 years that I know on the 6th of January on a cloudy day, there is a corner of that window where the blue turns a vibrant purple. Because I have sat in front of the same window, I can experience these moments of divinity that I can't if I keep running around looking at everybody else's. However, I also, while I can appreciate them and visit them and enjoy the similarities and the hues and my job in my spiritual life is all about belief, intention, and will. So it is about moving forward. I can't break everybody's windows. They've got light coming through them too. But practicing my spirituality here, and for me, that's the framework. For Catholicism, this is the framework. This is the way in which I experience the indwelling and then the outdwelling, the interplay, the movement of divinity.
And it connects very nice. For me, it's like this breaking in that you mentioned is not just the divine coming through the material to join us. It's reconnecting us in the divinity we have in us, since creation
Absolutely.
creates or allowed to reconnect this bond, right? I know so many religions that focus on this notion of we are all having a divine in us that we experience, that we can share, that we live, and that looks to connect to the overall divine. And for me, this is so part of my faith as well, that I'm created. We are all, there's a spirit and divinity, a spark of divinity in all of us, and that allowed us also to connect again. And this, that also means then also, how do I treat actually other people? Because I love the Hindu greeting of Namaste, right? The God in me greets the God in you. And so this notion of I'm divine, you have divine aspects, and we are meeting here to live together and explore and respect each other in that journey of finding our glass windows, knowing that our glass window is, shows on January 6th on this side something completely different than on this side, right? And that's just the beauty of it.
It's all about connection, and you put it beautifully. So I want to thank everybody for joining us in this discussion. We're going to have lots of other discussions, and you can watch us go off into the fields of ideas and hopefully find yourself in the journey. So thank you for being with us this day.
Thank you for joining us today for Radio Catholic Exile. We'd love to hear from you. Audio guests send questions, requests for social links, and suggestions for future shows to revkelly.cce@mail.com. For Liturgy of the Hours and more information about our church, join us on Discord at the link shown here, which audio guests may also request by email. Learn even more about us at CatholicChurchInExile.com. For Urbana-Champaign, Illinois worship, sacraments, and pastoral care, go to CatholicChurchInExile.org. Until next time, may you be blessed.